Freedom requires power. Power is just the ability to produce the results you want. It's the strength and resources required to do what you want to do, go where you want to go, say what you want to say, and to bring about change. If you have no power, then you have no freedom. So we all need power. The question is how that power is used. Power is most obvious when it's being used in oppressive and exploitative ways, when it's being hoarded by a few at the top. But if we want liberty and justice for all people, then no one person or one group of people should have power over any other person or group. The problem isn't power, it's domination. The answer to domination is equality. Instead of having power over another person, you have power with another person. Rather than hoarding power, you agree to share power in ways that are mutually beneficial.
Well, that sounds fine and dandy, but in reality, some people don't want to share. Some people don't want any limit on what they can do to other people. They equate freedom with impunity and control.
You're right, the freedom that comes with equality does require limits. That's a trade off. But here's why that trade off is worth it, even for the selfish person. Not to benefit someone else, but to protect you. Here's how equality enables freedom, how we can manage the limits of equality, and why equality is better not just for those currently at the bottom of society, but also better for those at the top. Hey, I'm Asante, and here's what I've been thinking. If you're new here, welcome. On this channel, we're imagining a better political future by looking at how democracy and power really work and what we the people need for society to thrive. So if we're trying to minimize the degree to which anyone can have power over you, then practically that means 1, you need to have a certain minimum amount of power yourself so that you can have agency. So there should be a universal minimum on power. 2, there should be limits on how much power any other person can have so that they don't have the ability to overwhelm you with force to do something against your will. So that means there should be a universal maximum on the amount of power that any individual can have. And 3, since power naturally concentrates, because having power enables you to get more power, instead of letting that power concentrate infinitely into a few hands, we intentionally break it up. And because groups can exert power over other groups, these principles would apply not only to individual people, but also to individual groups. So that middle zone that we've created, that's the zone of equality. Without having the limits that create a zone of equality, the most powerful people will be able to rise to a position of total dominance. And the most powerful people will be the ones who are willing to take power by any means necessary. Without limits, you have a system that incentivizes ruthless, antisocial, cutthroat behavior. And then, since the most ruthless people will be the most successful, you end up with a society essentially run by psychopaths and the people who behave like them.
Sounds familiar.
A zone of equality protects all of us by ensuring that no one gets too far above anyone else.
So you're not saying equality means everyone has to be the same.
No, not at all. Equality isn't about sameness, it's about relationship. 1 plus 1 equals 2, but both sides of the equation are not the same. 1 plus 1 is an expression with 3 symbols. 2 is a number, but one side is not greater than or less than the other side. Similarly, fundamental human equality is the idea that every person's humanity is equally valuable. No one person is fundamentally greater than or less than any other person. So, everyone's needs should be given equal consideration. People should have equal rights and be treated with equal justice and equal dignity. Equality is a power dynamic.
But what about people who aren't as talented or intelligent? Do we have to treat them as equals?
As equal humans worthy of dignity? Yes. That doesn't mean you have to follow their lead or believe whatever they tell you. We're not all equally qualified for every role. Some of us have more skill or better judgment than others. But we are all equally human. You can be better at something without being better than someone. The freedom that flows from equality creates diversity. If people don't have their potential squashed by others and they're not forced to conform to an arbitrary model, then they'll wind up having different skills, different interests, temperaments, and ways of life.
And different levels of work ethic. Doesn't that mean some people will make more money than others?
Well, yes. Again, equality isn't about sameness, it's about relationship. We don't all need to have the exact same dollar amount of money in the bank, but we should have equality of economic condition. A society rises and falls together. As I plan to discuss more in this future video, we all contribute to generating social stability and prosperity. No one is completely self-made. So we should all share in the rewards of social prosperity. We don't all need to be living in a penthouse, but if some people are living in mansions, then no one should be living on the street. The type of minor inequality that comes from personal preferences or differences in work ethic isn't a problem, but there are natural limits to the degree of inequality between any two human beings. We're all way more similar than we are different. You might be twice as strong as I am, or even 10 times as strong as I am, but you're probably not 300 times as strong as I am. You're a human, not an elephant. You, as an individual person, can't work 300 times as hard as I work. So that's no way to justify the fact that today's top CEOs make on average 300 times the amount of the typical employee in the same industry. There comes a point where you didn't get all that power by natural differences. You got that power by gaining power over other people, by hoarding rather than sharing the proceeds fairly. Differences aren't the problem, domination is. Okay, but what if I want to be filthy rich? I mean, who wouldn't want servants at their beck and call and a private jet to whisk them around the world? I want to be able to snap my fingers and do whatever I want, whenever I want, wherever I want. And therein lies the problem, the constant temptation of more. Of course, if we didn't allow for resource hoarding, then there would be enough plenty to satisfy everyone. But people hold on to and vote for systems of domination because they want to be the dominator. It's the idea that we're all just temporarily embarrassed rich people. It's tempting to think that if we could just work a little harder, that we could push our way into that top tier of society and then reap the unlimited rewards. But that's not how systems of power work. If you're currently poor under a system that allows for exploitation, where power concentrates into the hands of those who are already powerful, then unless you get incredibly lucky, the odds are that you're going to continue to be exploited regardless of what you do, because you, being poor, have the least power and are the easiest to exploit. The only way to reliably get out is to change the system to eliminate exploitation. The same thing goes for social domination. Some people think, well, I want to be in the dominant cultural or ethnic group. I'll make sure that my people are on top so that by extension, I'll be on top. But anyone who's vying to be socially on top of other people is ruthless. Do you think you can trust a ruthless person to make space for you to be able to rise and gain power yourself? Power that could threaten their position? Do you think if a ruthless person had the opportunity to profit from taking advantage of you, that they would care which social group you're a part of? Oh, come now. That would be a betrayal. Who would do such a thing? Furthermore, power gained in one area can easily be converted into power in another area. If one person gains power by exploiting 50 people from an ethnic group that you don't care about, well, now that person has the power of 50 people, and you have the power of one. That's a threat. It's an imbalance of power where you can't compete. This is why white Americans fought a civil war to stop the expansion of slavery into free territory. It's not because they cared about black rights, most of them didn't. It's because they saw that the power that slave owners gained allowed them to turn their society into an oligarchy. People who believed in doing honest, hard work with their own two hands, or who wanted to build their own businesses from the ground up based on free labor, those people were always going to be at a disadvantage within a slave system. Systems of domination that allow one person or group to hoard power allow the most ruthless people to dominate everyone, even members of the same social group. Instead, we could create a system with no permanent winners so that there are no permanent losers, so that we all share in the advantages that a peaceful, stable, free, and just society creates. Equality benefits everyone. Well, not everyone. Sure, equality benefits those who were slaves or maybe ordinary workers, but for the masters, obviously domination is the way to go. Actually, no. Domination is specifically bad for the dominators because power imbalances distort relationships, and we all need healthy relationships not only to have a satisfying personal life, but to also effectively get things done. With a servant master relationship, the servants prioritize pleasing the master, telling them whatever they want to hear, rather than telling them the hard but necessary truth. So the emperor walks out naked. That's bad for the emperor. Also, masters eventually tend to attribute their own success not to their own privilege, good fortune, or ruthlessness, but to their own innate superiority. This will cut them off from the input of other inferior people and blind them to their own human imperfections, which will lead to ignorance and bad decision making. Taken to the extreme, this kind of grandiosity and narcissism leads you to believe that since you really are fundamentally better than other people, you therefore have the right to do whatever you want to them. You dehumanize yourself by cutting yourself off from natural human empathy and treating others as objects to be used and manipulated. Not only do dominators suffer because they turn themselves into ignorant monsters incapable of human connection, they also suffer because they turn the rest of society against them. They will get less trust and less cooperation because no one likes being dominated. So they'll face more resistance in getting what they want, and things will be less efficient and therefore less productive. You'll have much less abundance if you have less equality. And the more you have an oppressed underclass struggling to survive, the more those people will be willing to do literally anything to get out of their current situation. Desperation makes people irrational. That's a recipe for social chaos. So, no, Delilah, extreme inequality and systems of domination are not good for anyone, including the people on top. If we want a prosperous society capable of making well informed decisions, then we need the trust and collaboration that flows from having a more equal and just society. Ugh, fine. This isn't the politics of envy. Despite what Crystal's side of my brain might suggest,
Run me the money, honey.
I don't actually want a position of economic dominance. I enjoy collaborating with other people as equals. Of course, I want economic security. I want enough money to sustain a nice, comfortable living, but the key word is enough. I know where enough is for me, and I don't need or want more than that. And by the way, if you'd like to help me to make that living and create more of these videos, then you can join my community on Patreon or you can buy me a coffee. Link to both of those will be in the description, along with a link to my email newsletter, which is the best way to make sure that you're notified about my future videos. Especially in this uncertain media landscape, get on the email list.
Okay, so how do we create this system of equality?
We make rules. Rules that help us to ensure a minimum level of power to all, a maximum limit to the power of individuals, and rules that help us to separate and distribute power when it naturally concentrates. We've typically been pretty good at understanding this concept when it comes to political power in the US. That's why we don't do kings. 2 terms as president is a maximum limit on political power. The right to vote is a universal minimum of political power that all citizens should be guaranteed. Not only that, but America's founders intentionally separated power between 3 branches of government so that the president would not be in charge of everything, would not have total control, and would not have concentrated power. In fact, they gave the most decision making power to Congress, which, since it has hundreds of members, is the branch where power is most distributed and most directly accountable to the people. Now, not only have people seemed to have forgotten the separation of powers, but for some reason, when we get to economic power, this somehow becomes controversial. We debate over whether we should guarantee a baseline of economic empowerment so that everyone can participate equally in society. We balk at setting any upper limits to earnings, as we used to do with progressive taxation and as we could do with a wealth tax. We hesitate to break up market power, allowing a handful of giant companies to monopolize entire industries. But power follows the same pattern in all its forms. If you don't take steps to intentionally limit and separate it, then it becomes domineering. This is the point of having laws and regulations. It's why the thinkers of the Enlightenment, including America's founders, made the distinction between liberty and license. The license to do whatever you want endangers liberty. As John Locke said in his second treatise of civil government, the end of law is not to abolish or restrain, but to preserve and enlarge freedom. For liberty is to be free from restraint and violence from others, which cannot be where there is no law. Locke understood that living in a state of overall freedom, liberty, requires having rules and limits that protect us from the uncertain, inconsistent, arbitrary will of the most powerful people. We need to have written and unwritten rules that say you don't have the freedom to exploit or abuse others. You don't have the freedom to degrade others. You don't have the freedom to arbitrarily take away someone else's freedom, because we're all treating each other as equals here.
Okay, but what counts as exploitation and abuse? What specific actions are degrading to others? What relationships count as being rooted in domination?
Well, those things are up for debate, but you can only have a fair debate if all sides of the issue get to state their case. This is why we need to have democratic deliberation. This is what politics is for. This is also part of the selfish case for inclusion and diversity, which I break down more in this video. If you don't include people from a diverse range of backgrounds and from different power positions within society, then you're less likely to hear from the people who are suffering the brunt of exploitation and abuse. You won't know that the system isn't working until it's too late. This is also why it's important to have a norm of truth telling. This is why it's illegal to lie in court. If people are deceiving others about what's real, then it's impossible to judge what's actually going wrong and what we should do about it.
Sounds a little open ended.
Life is open ended. The goal is not to define the terms exploitation or domination as precisely as possible, it's to use those terms to negotiate working together as effectively as possible. Not efficiently, effectively. Being effective is about maximizing the quality of what you produce. I care about having a high quality society, one with widespread prosperity, security, liberty, and justice for all. If we take that to be our shared goal, then we can have an ongoing dialogue about how to prevent exploitation as different situations arise. We can have emergent solutions. The rules that we live by will never be perfect, but they do need to be mutually agreed upon and mutually respected, at least by most people within the community. This is the point of democracy, to have a system that isn't controlled from the top down, but that's empowered from the bottom up. It's not that a few established elites get to decide the laws and citizens have to obey. It's that we, the people, participate in crafting the rules that govern our own lives. Needless to say, this kind of democracy is not what we have today. A congruent democracy is based on the ideal of political equality. If you want to know more about what that kind of democracy looks like and how it compares to what we have now, then you can check out this video right here, or you could dive into my pro democracy reading list, which is linked in the description. Or you can ditch the equality talk and try working out a scheme for total world domination. May the most ruthless competitor win. That choice is up to you. I'll let you make up your own mind. Think about it.